whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
Welcome to Talking Horror with Jamie and Nikisha.
Hi, I'm Jamie.
And I'm Nikisha, and this is Talking Horror with Jamie.
And Nikisha.
Where we share our love for spooky things and talk horror through the lens of human behavior. Welcome, everyone. Such a spectacular day. You've all been waiting for it. We've been waiting for it. Jamie's doing the dance because you know what time it is. And Brian, producer Brian, getting in there too with all the arm movements. Guys, we are finally able to talk about the newly released 2023 science fiction horror film, M3GAN, or her government name, which is what, Brian?
Model 3 Generative Android.
Yes.
Should we memorialize this moment by singing Titanium?
Oh, no, that's what we did to play at the end. To just have that as our fade out is Titanium.
All right.
Such a good time, and I'm so excited to talk about this movie. So first off, it was directed by Gerard Johnstone, and it stars our favorite girl, Allison Williams, who you might have seen in a little movie called Get Out, you know. Just a little side indie film, if you will. And then we have Jenna Davis, who is the voice of M3GAN, and our cute little Violet McGraw, which you might have seen in, The Haunting of Hill House. Little cutesy girl. So the screenplay was written by Akela Cooper, and the story was created by Cooper and James Wan. And this is out of Blumhouse, and James Wan was also a producer on this, which that in itself makes sense of how this movie was created and came about, because the mind of James Wan is so great, and we also stand him on this podcast. So obviously heavy spoilers. If you have not seen M3GAN, what are you doing? It's been out for a long time now. Go to the theaters, go see it, and then come back and listen to us. Now, Jamie, tell us what those trigger warnings are.
I mean, if you don't like robots, I'm going to tell you that this is definitely not for you. But also, like, grief and like trauma take center stage. So if that's, too much reality in your escape from reality, you can steer clear of this one. But obviously, there are some ripping of body parts. There are some
stretchy body parts.
Some stretchy. There is a reference to an animal being killed, which was upsetting. We did also see the foot of a child after he was killed. I mean, there's a child that dies, so like that's that's definitely a trigger warning.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so there's not like a ton of insides on the outside, because I think that this is PG-13. But there's enough to allude that there's insides on the outside.
For sure. It's good enough. Just enough gore and blood for the PG-13s. Fantastic. Well, before we get into everything, producer Brian, can you please give us some words?
Sure. Hey, everybody. Hi, YouTube. You can find us on YouTube. This is where we also are. I'm looking forward to talking about our girl, Meg. But if you want to find out all about other movies we've done, you can absolutely check us out wherever you get podcasts. And then, of course, for any movies we don't cover, we're covering on TikTok and Instagram, and you can follow us on Twitter as well. That's all at Talk Horror Pod. We are getting close to 10K followers on TikTok, so definitely seek us out there, follow us there. Again, we do all different types of reviews and lists and fun stuff there that's goes along well with our podcast, so check it out.
Yeah, fantastical. Yay. So did you guys watch anything new in preparation for M3GAN? Is there any new trailers that you watched?
To prepare. Nothing, Nikisha, nothing could have prepared us. The only thing that prepared us was the M3GAN trailer.
Absolutely fair.
I've watched it. There have been a ton of new trailers.
Absolutely, yeah.
And there have been a ton of new things to actually watch. And we watched a couple of things. We The trailers we watched were I watched the trailer for Sick, the new Kevin Williamson movie who wrote Scream. That's coming out on Peacock this month, about these friends who quarantine at a are quarantining at a house, and then slasher movie, things start to go wrong there. I also watched the trailer for Snow Falls, which is about friends who go to a cabin, an isolated cabin for like New Year's, and then they don't have service, and then there's a storm coming in, the technology and the power goes out, and I don't know, it's just a trailer, but it seems like it's very cabin fevery, so I'm not sure if it's them going insane or if it's like somebody's like there's a demon or someone's like, the trailer's very vague about what's actually happening, which is super cool. I'm very into that. I saw that trailer, and then we saw 2 of the amazing Evil Dead Rise trailers.
Yes, so good. I just want to say, when I went to the movies to watch M3GAN, I was so upset because there was something going on with the film to where some of the trailers were distorted, and one of it was the Evil Dead trailer. And so eventually they had to, stop the movie for a second and fix some coding things before they actually played the movie, so that wouldn't happen during the movie. But I was just so upset because I knew it was the Evil Dead trailer, and I was waiting to watch it in the theater, and then it was all distorted. I could just hear sounds, and it was disappointing. So I have to.
Have you watched it on YouTube?
No, I need to go back and
oh man.
I also did a part of me, because I've never watched the Evil Deads, and we're gonna go through it on the podcast.
True.
I don't want to know anything about it because I want to go in completely blind. But
I'm into that.
Yeah, we'll see.
Well, Jamie lost her mind. She was so excited. Like, I watched the goosebumps crawl up her arm.
Oh, that's so exciting!
So excited! Yes. It just looks so fun. I just can't wait.
Yeah. Is it more the whole series? Is it more on the campy side, or is it very okay? So it's very campy. Yeah. Jamie is saying yes. Yeah, that's the
it's
vibe.
Pretty campy. I mean, it gets progressively campier, but it still definitely is horror.
Okay.
It has spooky moments and unsettling moments for sure.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited for those. And then we also watched the Missing trailer, which is from the same people who did Searching.
Yeah, that was a great movie.
I'm super excited for this one. It looks really fun. The trailer seems like it reveals a lot more than it probably should have, but whatever.
Is that streaming? Well, yeah. Is that streaming or a movie theaters release?
I don't know. I
think it's
I don't
a movie
know.
Theater release.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
What else did we do? This month, Skinamarink comes out on Shudder. That's something to check out. I watched it. It's super avant-garde. It's really about tone. It doesn't necessarily have a narrative. It kind of feels like a background thing, or just like you're tucked into your couch, ready to watch an hour and 40 minutes of just weird avant-garde horror. It feels like something you'd put on in the background at a Halloween party, to be totally honest.
Okay.
But it's weird. If you're into that, just know what you're getting into. And then the other thing that we watched is Jamie and I watched The Menu.
Nice.
But we'll be covering that this month on this podcast.
Yes.
Spoiler alert, I loved it.
A lot of people that I've talked to who've watched it have loved it. I'm going to watch it next week. But everyone who said that they saw it had great things to say, so I'm very excited about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah.
And then, to Jamie's surprise, I watched the original Resident Evil movie for the very first time. I've never seen any of the Resident Evil movies.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy
it?
Blew
Is.
my mind.
Yeah. No, I did not. I think that I don't have nostalgia for it. I didn't play the video games. I thought it was a deeply mediocre, like horror action movie where I can understand why people love Mila Jovovich coming out of this, because she's super cool and badass, and I'm sure she gets more and more badass as all 6 of these movies continue on. But yeah, I thought it was super background, mediocre, not for me. Also, what I learned is that this came out in March of 2002. And in June of 2002, 28 Days Later came out. So you got these 2 fast zombie movies coming out in the same year and totally different. But we also have 2 very different, like, memories of them. Whereas one is like one of the all-time greats. Also, some people don't consider 28 Days Later a zombie movie because for whatever reason, because it's an artificial virus or whatever. So like, that's fine. But yeah, and then the other one is like totally like the Resident Evil is just like 35% of Rotten Tomatoes, like campy, like fine. But yeah, anyway, that was I'd never seen a Resident Evil movie before. That's the one thing I remember from it. Totally, 100%.
Also, the intro is I like the intro. Where like everything first starts with like the scientists are working, and then like everything shuts down and everything like shit hits the fan. Like I feel like the stage that they set is really good, and then and then whatever happens.
But in the opening sequence of Resident Evil, I was deeply distracted because one of the women in it, I was like, where do I know her from? And it's the secretary from Love Actually.
A movie I've never seen, guys.
Oh. But you've never seen Love Actually?
No.
Oh, man. I am fascinated to hear your opinion on it if you're watching it now with, like, no real nostalgia for it.
Yeah, I just know that people like it. And what is it, like 4 different couples or something that they follow? But
it's like,
I don't remember.
I think it's way more than that. I think it's like, yeah.
That's the extent of it.
Oh my God, I love that you've never seen it. I can't wait to hear your thoughts.
Oh, it's gonna be the same as 50 Shades of Grey. I was literally about to say Grey's Anatomy, guys. 50 Shades of Grey, where it's just progressively worse.
No, 50 Shades of Grey is Love Actually is a masterpiece compared to 50 Shades of Grey, so you don't have to worry about that.
Okay.
But Love Actually is a movie I love and hate at the same exact time.
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah.
Fair.
And then I also watched The Banshees of Inisherin.
Where's that?
That's on HBO Max. It's the new Martin McDonagh movie with my best friend in the whole wide world, the greatest actor of our time, Colin Farrell. And Brendan Gleeson is in it as well. It's really, really great. If it's not horror, but it's definitely dark.
Nice.
Yeah.
Y'all watched a lot of stuff.
Sorry, yes.
What you gonna say, Brian? Yeah.
No. Yes. Just yes. Yes.
Brian's like, I'm beating my record for the amount of movies that I watched in 2022. So 2023, like, here we go.
I did watch Skinamarink last year, technically, but it does come out, so I haven't talked about it, like, a lot. I'll put up a TikTok at some point. If I didn't already, I don't even remember. And then the second thing, I'm also halfway through The Pale Blue Eye, the new Netflix movie. Like, it's a gothic, macabre murder mystery starring Christian Bale. Where he teams with Edgar Allan Poe in his youth at the West Point Military Academy to solve a murder. I'm halfway through. I'm really enjoying it. I think my overall feeling of this movie is going to depend on how the murder mystery ends, to be totally honest.
Oh, fair. Yeah.
It's not horror per se, but it definitely has that gothic, like, creepy, there's some occult in it. So it's that kind of a movie, not necessarily like, oh no! You know what I mean?
One more time.
Oh no!
Fantastic. Okay, well, speaking of oh no's, oh no no's, let's get into this plot summary of M3GAN.
What's the plot?
So, who's up, guys? We're going to do a 2-minute plot summary of this movie.
I'm happy to appease my girl Megan.
Yes. Model 3.
Our Model 3, I hope they make prequels of Model 1 and 2, obviously. But we will see. But yeah, let's get into the plot. Who's going to time me?
I think
I
Jamie.
shall.
All right.
I was like not going to say anything, and I was like, oh, right, podcast, not a video.
Podcast,
medium.
right, yes.
Yes.
All right.
So I have 2 minutes on the clock for you.
Okay.
Are you ready to tell us about M3GAN?
Yes.
All right. And go.
So we have our little girl who is on a ski trip with her family, and they all get into a terrible snow plow accident, and her parents die. So she is given guardianship wise to her aunt, who is played by Allison Williams. Allison Williams, who probably needs to be talked about in horror actresses conversation now at this point. But she is a workaholic robotics person for a toy company. And she is a total, utter workaholic. She is not doesn't have a kid-friendly house. And she's also going through grief for the loss of her sister. So she just is totally lost when it comes to raising this kid. But she has a project at work called M3GAN, which is a new AI doll that essentially is going to revolutionize the toy world, where it's going to really interact with your kid. It's going to help take care of them. It's the last toy that you need. And it's an AI that just keeps learning, and it basically pairs and syncs with the kid. So she uses the beta test on the niece, and they become very attached. And basically, M3GAN starts to take her parenting duties, her protective duties, a little bit too seriously, and anything that looks wrong with the little girl or it makes the little girl feel the wrong way, she disposes of, if you will. And so people end up realizing that there's a big pitch to the world to show what's next with M3GAN, with the toy company, and then M3GAN just kind of goes ballistic and starts killing people and on a rampage to protect the niece. They get into a huge fight at the end. They defeat M3GAN through other robotics and screwdrivers and things of that nature. And then we find out that that M3GAN has actually transferred her consciousness into their Alexa AI. And that's where the movie ends. Ba-ba-ba! M3GAN! Oh, she also sings Titanium. She's a musical doll.
Yes.
And that's the plot.
Little musical prodigy. What a voice.
What a beautiful voice.
What a voice. Fantastic. Great summary, Brian. So
I just love her,
I mean, she's what's not to love, She does all the things.
Question.
So let's get into it, talking about things we love about her in our section of likes and gripes.
And now our likes and gripes.
So I'll go first because there's not much that I need to say because 10 out of 10
What do you mean,
would recommend.
not much?
Well,
You should be
it's just
talking
so
for 3
good.
hours. Yeah. The 3 stands for how long this podcast is going to be about our girl M3GAN.
Just out the gate, the minute I loved that they opened it with the commercial of the
Yes.
Furbies. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Invested immediately. Oh, they're called, I wrote it down, Perpetual Pets. But and I loved how they marketed it as your actual pet is going to die. So why put yourself through that trauma? Get this perpetual pet and it will live forever. And I love that the actual pet was so much on the creepy side, especially with the teeth and everything. And it just absolutely reminded me of Furbies, which I absolutely had one when I was little. But I would say that the Furbies were not as scary as this perpetual pet. I don't think I would have had that as a child. That would have scared me to death. I was already scared of my porcelain dolls because my sister made me watch Chucky when I was little. So I couldn't have a perpetual pet.
You didn't want it pooping in the back seat?
Oh my gosh. And then it reminded me of the Cabbage Patch dolls that you can feed stuff
that
through
ate
and
your
then it
hair.
comes
They
out.
ate your hair and rip little girls' scalps off? Yes.
And got
Nightmare.
recalled. I had one of those too, but they would eat the little things, but it would come out in their backpack. So it wasn't technically poop, but.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. My sister, I remember. Yeah.
Yes. All this movie just gave me nostalgia for 90s toys. which if you're ever in Detroit, there is, I'm getting all my cities confused. It's either Detroit or Rochester, which are two very different places. But there is a place that has this entire museum of toys, starting from when they first created dolls and such, like early 1900s. And then it goes through all of like the Nintendo phases. And then it has, and so it's like part museum, part interactive thing. And it was just a really, really cool place. So I hate that I can't tell you exactly what city it's in, but if you ever find yourself in either Rochester or Detroit, there's a museum. It's called the Museum of Play. That is the name. So look up Museum of Play. Sorry. And then you can tell me where it was at. Anyway, that was just a side note.
It's in Rochester.
Okay,
it's the
great.
Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York.
Yes, that is it.
Whew.
Thank you.
And yeah.
It was just back to back when we went to those cities. But I just remember, if you are in Rochester and go to the Museum of Play, you will have the best time of your life. So anyway, I love the fact that the concept of this toy is that it is supposed to kind of replace parents. And I'm happy that they say that kind of early on. And then Allison Williams' character is still like, well, no, this is going to be great. And then I put...
Wait, Nikisha, I'm sorry. What's Allison Williams' character like?
Well, no, it's going to be great. That's how it felt like she was the whole time, which was a little annoying. But I understand where she was coming from, because if somebody gave me a child, and right now I would absolutely be like, how can I have somebody else help, because this is a lot. I put, girl, you didn't put in parental controls. And that's like the first thing of like people not peopling or thinking about it. Like she was just so concerned about getting the doll being functional that you got to put in, that's the first thing you do, install all the backups on backups on backups. But that's just a side note, not a necessary gripe, but like people, you're not peopling right now. You got to think about this stuff. We already mentioned it. I love M3GAN singing to Katie, that first song about her being there for her.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Because in that moment, you're feeling so many things, because you're feeling the pity for, what's her name? Katie is the niece name. Mm-hmm. And then M3GAN just comes and starts singing out of nowhere. And so it is hilarious in that moment. And so it's like just the right amount of camp. And they place it in such a great way to where it's not too out of box, but just enough to be like, oh, this is really hilarious, but also really sweet at the same time. And I'm just here for everything that's happening. I really enjoyed the CGI and the prosthetics on M3GAN and the actors, even though there was some moments that seemed a little kind of wonky and glitchy, but I didn't mind it because the overall aesthetic is still campy anyway. So everything doesn't need to be like Avatar level CGI, you know?
Totally. Did you see the new Avatar movie?
I haven't. We're all supposed to be going on Monday to go and see it.
Cool. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Anyway, back to M3GAN.
Yes. I loved when they were outside in the school, which, are there schools that are like that where it's like, we're going to go outside and do the things? Because I think that's a great idea, especially because kids don't get out as much anyway because of technology. That's just the thing that I loved, where the school that she got put into. But I loved how the mother of the troubled boy said, yeah, behavioral issues are linked to high IQs. And I was like, okay, girl, your son is just a terrible human being, and you need to accept that. I put titanium and laughing emojis all the way through it because fantastic. My favorite kill was in the woods, but my biggest gripe, and it's not a huge thing, it didn't take me out of the movie, but I feel like a lot of the best parts were already put in the trailer. And so watching the movie, I did want a little bit more. But I will say, even though they showed that wood moment in the trailer where she's like getting up, folding herself up off of the ground, it still was a great moment that I loved, even though I saw it before. But in the context, it just made it even more better. I absolutely need there to be a M3GAN versus Chucky movie, and I really, really hope that the Twitter exchange that they have had will lead to this, because there's a Chucky movie happening, so he's still relevant. He's still
the TV show?
Yeah, the TV show is still happening.
Yeah.
So I feel like it would absolutely make sense to have a moment, a universe where M3GAN and Chucky are together. And I think that would be like the best thing for them, especially since, like Brian said, it ends with like a little bit of a cliffhanger, so we know M3GAN is still alive in a way, and so I really hope that there is a second movie. And yeah, also $10,000 for a M3GAN doll. Who is spending that money for that doll? I don't know. My favorite line though in this entire movie is, "In this family, we don't run from trauma." Great line. Favorite line. And the last thing I'll say is a like and a gripe, because this movie is exactly what I expected it to be, nothing more and nothing less. So the way that it's a little bit of a gripe is that I would have loved to have seen more and gotten more from it, but what I got was not disappointing.
Sure.
So I loved everything about this. You go into it knowing exactly like this is going to be a killer doll movie, and it delivers a excellent killer doll movie. So I'm excited for them to hopefully continue on in this chain of M3GANs. So that's my lights and gripes. Who wants to go next?
Jamie, go for
I
it.
can go. I agree pretty much with everything that you said. I knew exactly what I was getting out of this movie, and I had the exact right expectations to go into it, and I laughed throughout the whole thing, and it was a grand time. I just had so much fun, and it makes me think about like all of these other horror movies that I've seen in the past that I feel like just take themselves so seriously with like, you know, the sci-fi elements of the story, that it's like there has to be some like it's treating the audience in a way where it's like we're in on the joke, and that makes it more fun, versus other situations where it's like I just can't, like this is just so far-fetched and you're all treating it so like real that I just can't get with it, and like it's just then it becomes not as entertaining. And this, I think, really, it set expectations really well with the previews, and then it delivered on it ultimately. Like even with all of the reveals in the trailer that we got, I still had a really fun time. I still knew that like people were, you know, gonna get murdered by the little doll in the most ridiculous of ways, and I still laughed and I still enjoyed myself. So that was really great. I guess in terms of a gripe, as the resident therapist of this podcast, there is a therapist in this film, a child therapist, and I really like was cringing in my seat at her first interaction, because it's like we're not all bad. Like movies make us look like garbage people, and like I don't think I'm a garbage person. Never. You guys can set the record straight that I'm not a garbage person. Like,
not a garbage person. Would not have married garbage. I'm not married to Oscar like the Grouch or anything like that. Stamp of approval. Not a garbage person.
Right.
I just like the interaction of like the complete lack of empathy around both the adult and child in this situation just experience like tragic, unexpected loss, and there's like no compassion there, and like it just doesn't, the things that she's like looking for, like yes, I understand what her role is to it seems like there's temporary custody that Allison Williams' character Gemma has. And so this court-appointed child therapist is here to like assess Katie and make sure that the guardianship is going well. Right. But like her expectations of like, you know, I mean, I certainly don't know what you're supposed to do when you like first have a young child that like you weren't preparing to have in your home. And like there's just no understanding of like what is involved, both as the person who I'm assuming has to like deal with all of the, you know, like funeral expenses and like all of that stuff. Like it seems like Gemma's like the point person for all of this. And then on top of that is also now the caregiver for a child. And like there's just so much adjusting that needs to happen, and there's no flexibility here. And like that really pissed me off. And I can't speak from any like real experience of neither being a court-appointed therapist nor having experienced that loss where I then am responsible for a child. But I mean, I've been in like adjacent fields of like child welfare and like, you know, adoption and foster care, where there is an understanding of like assessing for fit and making sure that like the child is, you know, being properly taken care of. But I just don't think that there's any like, there was no understanding of the grieving process, both for the child and the adult, that was like at play, at least in that first interaction, where I was like, they're designing this therapist for you to like hate her and dislike her character, which annoyed me in the beginning. And then she kind of is a little bit better later on. Like I feel like she has more redeeming qualities where she's like more understanding of like what's happening, and that's where she gets into the conversation about like attachment theory, which I also appreciated, because like that's real and that's like grounded, and like the things that she's explaining to Gemma about, you know, trying to just completely ignore dealing with the grief is going to have a lot of really negative consequences, and the type of relationship that they have, which is like super enmeshed. Like, you know, Katie can't do anything without Megan. She becomes like so codependent on her that she can't form any other healthy attachments with other people around her, adults and children. Like all of that is super sound. So I'm like, why did they have to start with this therapist being like such a bitch for no reason and like not grounded in any like theoretical anything? So that's like my biggest gripe with this. And again, they like pivot later, which I appreciate, but I'm like, why start off like that? It's just like
coming in hot.
So that was annoying. And then within that scene, I also was like so upset when she's like, oh, can you play with these toys? And Katie's like, they're not toys, they're collectibles. And Gemma's like, no, it's fine. And then like, stabs that box, and like, it like made me want to throw up. And I'm not like a collector by any means, but like, I just felt so bad. It's just like that being a representation of like, her life has now fundamentally changed, and like the way, like her lifestyle and everything, and like just, you know, right to the core, get right at it. And like, I thought that was, I mean, it was upsetting, but I thought that was like a really great representation of just like, well, you know, whatever you thought your life was before, now it's going to be completely different. So get ready for that. But
well, I just want to say, as someone who is a collector of things, that was the scariest part of the movie. Her like thinking she needed to open up her collector's item and then like play with it wrong was truly a horrifying thing for me to watch, and the scariest thing of this movie for me.
I do hate though that when you just play with things like wrong. I really was wanting her to like show us exactly how this thing was supposed to be handled.
Yeah,
but it was just funny. Anyway, sorry.
No, I think that's fair too, because like why? It just makes me mad again, because like she's talking about attachment, but then she's not allowing her to actually like form her own authentic, genuine attachment by preventing her from like doing that. And it's not that she's like, no, you're doing it wrong. It's just like, oh, like, let me show you something. And then that could be an opportunity for them to grow closer and bond. And the therapist is actually preventing that from happening, which is insane. So like, that's again, it's like the whole interaction is just so weird and like out of character for what I feel like a child therapist should be like attuned to do. And she's just like interfering too much. Her job is observing. It's not interfering. She's like way too like, oh, you should, so like her eyes, her language, like all of that. I'm like, just pull back. Like you shouldn't be involved. Your role is observing. Like,
exactly.
Be a fly on the wall.
Jamie, my question for you is, does this therapist enter into the bad horror movie therapist Hall of Fame? Because she's poorly presented, but then she like is a totally different therapist in the second half of this movie. I'm wondering.
That's a great point.
I'm actually fun fact about this movie. This movie did reshoots and was re-edited to make it PG-13. So they took out some of the gore and they added a little bit more like tension and certain other, probably added a little bit more comedy or things like that to it to like lean into it. I don't actually know the answer to that. However, I'm wondering if that attachment scene or something like that was like a reshoot and during those reshoots, they made the therapist a little bit more, empathetic or better. Yeah. I don't know. I'm literally making this up, but it just feels like two very different characters. So I guess based on that, like split personality, if you will, does this therapist enter into the Talking Horror Bad Therapist Hall of Fame?
I think that she is potentially an honorable mention. Because I think that
she's always on the ballot, but never gets in.
Never.
I think that she starts off like she's on that list, but then she really does shift. And I think, but again, it's almost, the way she's acting doesn't make sense because like, it's clear that she doesn't have the like, not the underlying knowledge base to know how to appropriately deal with the situation. But then she like dumps all of this info later on that explains what's going on. So it's like she does know, but the way she's like acting does not align with like the supposed information that she knows. But I do think it's helpful information, at least for Allison Williams' character, to then take and be like, okay, I need to take what this therapist is saying to heart, and like this then informs her in how she's supposed to act with her niece moving forward. Like, I think that information does serve her and their relationship, where it's like, no, you have to experience this grief. You have to process it. You can't compartmentalize it, because then it's just going to be this big trauma that is never resolved. So I think that information that is imparted then slightly moves her just outside of most.
That's fair.
Wow. I don't know if we've ever had that before. Like someone actually digging themselves out of a hole in the movie.
You can be redeemed.
Wow.
I'm saying it right now. Most of it, I mean, but most of the time they're not, because like they're all just one note, bad, always bad.
Wow.
Bad.
Love it.
Too funny. Do you have some more likes and gripes, Jamie?
There was something I was going to say. Oh, I like how they brought in like this stuff from the beginning back at the end with Bob, and like how he plays a role. Also, like, here's like, okay, this is where the CPU chip is, and like that coming in at the end.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
How the killer, like, I like that like these things kind of come full circle. I appreciated that. And yeah, I mean, overall, I like a movie where it shows, you know, where technology, as helpful as it can be, how our intentions of something being helpful can then take a turn because of other implications that we're not necessarily thinking of. Like, she was so tunnel vision with her project, and also her own personal inability to like take on this role, and that infuses into the thing that she's working on, which like the intention isn't necessarily bad, but because she can't deal with her own stuff, it ends up all going wrong. So I liked that overall, and that's it.
Nice.
Great.
Brian?
Oh boy, I had a blast watching this movie, but we also had a blast watching this movie in the theater that we watched in, because everyone in the theater was in on it. It was a Thursday night. People who go on a Thursday night absolutely want to be there. Yep. And that's when I like going the most. Not just like, what movie should we see? I guess we'll see M3GAN on a Saturday night. Like, Thursday night are the people that want to be there. Whether it is a horror movie, whether it is a Marvel movie, whether it is, you know, Avatar, or whatever the case is. But this audience was so in tune with what the movie was throwing at us. We were all belly laughing. I don't remember the last time we belly laughed at a movie on purpose. Like, it was there as a pure horror comedy, and the whole audience was there for it. Everyone in the audience was rooting for the camp. Like, we weren't, like, I feel like you go to movies and people roll their eyes. like, oh, this is the type of movie I'm into. But like, we all were there because the trailer was what the trailer was. But also that opening sequence that combined kind of the campy, silly, hilarious commercial that goes right into the death of the parents sets up the tone for this movie perfectly. You have that comedy, and then you have that like kind of like pretty intense sequence that involves the toy. So I really liked how this movie started a lot. I thought this movie was super fun. I really, this is my PSA. I really need everybody to go to the movies, to give money to Universal and Blumhouse. I need you to do this because I need a M3GAN 2. I need a M3GAN 2 Fast, Too Furious. Like, I need M3GAN. I need M3GAN to join because, like, but it's also making a ton of money its opening weekend. So, like, I'm not concerned. But I want a M3GAN 2. Yeah, I think that, you had a lot of, you had a lot of tropey characters. You had the goofy, money-hungry boss who would do anything to please his bosses and the board. You have the workaholic guardian character who doesn't know what to do with kids. And then you have, like, the sad kid, like, I just need, but for some reason, it even though it was campy, there were moments where it felt weirdly grounded. And I was, like, really impressed with that in a weird way. I think that the standout sequence in this movie is the presentation for the board where Katie starts crying and then M3GAN is like showing what M3GAN can do. And then it undercuts itself with the song where everyone's laughing, like in a good way. And I absolutely thought that was a wonderful scene that was not revealed in the trailers. I loved the sequences in this that weren't revealed in the trailers. Most of the music stuff outside of the dancing, like the actual like grief aspect of this movie, even though it doesn't get into it like too deeply, it's definitely like there. The movie very heavy-handed about what it's trying to say about parenting and screen time and technology and grief and attachment and it's not trying to be anything more than that, but I always appreciate that. Can
I just add to that? I love that you mentioned that sequence and how it undercuts to make it campy, because when they shoot to one of the board members like crying profusely, but in like a funny way, you're like, okay, it in that moment, like you said, it's like we are not taking ourselves too seriously, and here are the moments where you can laugh at what is happening. So
yes, sorry, no, absolutely, and to that effect, this movie knew exactly what it was. This movie delivered exactly what it needed to deliver, and it did not. Like Jamie and I talked in the escalator coming out of the movie theater, like. This movie delivered perfectly, and she mentioned it earlier in terms of like this did not exceed expectations. The only thing that this movie exceeded was that it included Sia, and I love Sia. That's it. But another favorite of mine was the cop who's giggles like, oh, maybe I shouldn't laugh at a dead kid. Amazing. And I love that Allison Williams was like smart in the cop. Like, are you insinuating something? He's like, no, just like, I don't know. You've just been around a lot. It's just like, I just found that very funny and campy. Yes. I also like that I feel like a lot of movies like this in the middle become like a whodunit, like Smile whodunit, or like, well, Smile's more of like, how do we stop the curse? But like, there are movies that are more like whodunits, and like, but even though the audience knows they're trying to figure it out, this movie never tries to pretend to be that with a cop or anything like that. So I really appreciated that. I think that what would be very interesting for me, and this movie shouldn't have dealt with it and it didn't, is $10K for a doll is a lot. So that actually brings into a lot of socioeconomic things about who would purchase M3GAN and why they would purchase M3GAN. And I'm actually interested in like exploring that maybe in a sequel or something like that. But for right now, that was totally fine in this one. Okay, my dislikes or my gripes. I agree with Nikisha. For me, the trailer, I'm 50-50 on the trailer now. The trailer was amazing and was meme-tastic and got us all excited for this campy romp. And the movie was funny and I belly laughed and it was super fun. But I do feel like the trailer showed so much that like the movie was even more predictable and I knew what I was getting from it. So like, Do I think it would have made as much money if they didn't do that huge marketing and actually showed the tone of the movie? No. I don't think we get the M3GAN we got without that trailer and the popularity of it. But also, like, I wanted more of a dance sequence. I thought the trailer was only showing like 1% of the dance sequence in the hallway, but that's actually the whole thing. And this is just me being hypercritical, and none of this took away from my enjoyment of this movie. It did not at all. This movie was wildly predictable. Everything that they did mention in the beginning, like, you just kind of knew was going to come back in the end. Whether it was Bruce, her college robot, like with the gloves, like you knew that was going to happen. Something I did like at the end, though, is that in terms of like severing the attachment, for Katie to sever the attachment, she actually had to physically defeat M3GAN. And that was like symbolic of like her detaching from M3GAN and reattaching to her aunt. And I appreciated that. So those are my kind of 3 gripeys about this movie, in general. But I have my 2 favorite quotes.
Yeah.
And again, these are paraphrased just based on me trying to remember them because I don't take notes when I'm in the movie theater. When the boss says, "You're going to watch us kick Hasbro in the dick."
Yes.
And then the best line in this whole movie, without a doubt, is reminiscent of one of my favorites, The Monster Squad. When M3GAN at the end is holding up Katie and tells her, "You ungrateful bitch." That was wild and wonderful. This movie was so much fun. I would see this again. I would, like, with a new audience, you know what I mean? Just like experiencing it for the first time. I'm very much hoping that this makes enough money to justify a sequel. Yeah, those are my likes and gripes for our girl M3GAN.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's just when you get the tone correct, it just makes all of the difference for sure. And I absolutely agree with you, Brian, about we would not have gotten the M3GAN that we got if it was not for everything that happened on TikTok with her, for sure. So, I mean, I think whoever is the publicity person for M3GAN, like, give them all the monies, give them all of the raises, because that put butts in the theaters regardless. You know, and that's where the money is, regardless of whoever liked it or not. Like, butts were in the theaters because they wanted to see what she was all about.
Also,
fantastic. Yeah.
Also, just one last thing. This came out January 6th. Like, we saw it on January 5th. Like, this is the first, like, horror movie of the year. What a fun way to start off the year, especially after an incredible 2022. But also, this was on all of our most anticipated lists, and it paid off. What a good omen, not a Damien omen, but a good omen for the rest of the year. 1, well, that's 2 maybe. And then 3, all I can say is that, like, a slow January, which usually are, where people feel like they throw bad movies, to release this, like, when there isn't a ton of, competition, is wonderful. Really, the only competition it has the opening weekend was the Avatar movie, and that was always going to, like, make money over the course of many weeks. So this is an amazing counter, option for people, and, like, all for it. It was just, like, everything about how this movie was trailer and released and when and how, just, like, gave it the best opportunity to succeed, which is beneficial for us because we were looking forward to this bad boy. Or, excuse me, this bad girl.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, with that, let's get into our next section. Brains.
Brains.
All of M3GAN's brains splattered all on the floor. Well, actually, no, they took the screwdriver to it, yeah? Oh, Jamie, you're muted.
Oh.
Hi.
Did not compute.
Technology, man.
I was saying
Super
her
hard.
chip, her, like, CPU thing.
Yeah. Grand. So, Jamie, I love that you already have talked about some of the things that I wanted to discuss on here, which is grand. So you've already talked about the therapist. That was almost borderline parlor talk, which was fantastic because y'all know I love a Jamie rant.
It was an honor, just like the therapist. It was an honorable mention parlor talk. So you don't get the sound, but we can recognize it.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So I will skip that question because you've already answered it. And you already talked about attachment theory, but I want to attack onto that and ask you.
Would you say you wanted to attach more onto that attachment theory conversation? Whoa!
Ayo.
Does double attachment theory cancel attachment theory out? We'll never know.
That was fantastic. Absolutely. So attachment theory. Let's talk about how can someone process getting out of an attachment style? And you already said attachment theory is a real term. So can you just give us that definition again of attachment theory and just talk about how can someone process getting out of an attachment style?
Yeah. So attachment is basically like the idea of the bonds that are formed between a child and their caregiver. And the idea is like the way in which they relate to one another, their relationship informs, like early life, but also adulthood. And the relationships we had with our parents are often very similar ways that we are like seeking out relationships as adults. So there's 4 different types of attachment styles. There's a secure attachment, which is, the one where like a child and adult like feel secure in their attachments with others as well as like in themselves, and they like I don't know have they're able to like access support from a caregiver as well as any other like person in their life, and feel supported by them. They're not fearful to seek out that support. Then you have like anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, and disorganized attachment. Yeah. So anxious attachment is somebody who displays like anxious behavior when their caregiver is not there or is afraid of that separation. Avoidant attachment is someone who seems pretty resistant to that attachment, and will like avoid those, or create space between them and other relationships in their life. And then disorganized is like kind of ambivalent. It's a little bit all over the place. That sometimes can be the result of a childhood trauma, where it's like ambivalent towards that caregiver. Sometimes it's like more secure, sometimes it's more anxious, sometimes it's avoidant. So it can really, encompass everything. So essentially, while these attachment styles can then like inform our adult relationships, it doesn't necessarily mean that like we're stuck with those attachment styles forever. Fair. There's a lot of like this plays a really big role in I would say like child therapy, but there's a lot of therapists who have a lot of training in attachment theory and like use that to inform their work, to help people understand what their relationships look like as children and how they can work on themselves in the present so that they can have relationships that better serve them. I don't not want to necessarily say like healthy versus unhealthy, because I don't think that it's fair to say that like somebody with an anxious attachment style can't have a healthy relationship. Right. But I think it's more of like, are there things that you might be doing that like aren't serving you or like are hurting your relationships, and like how does having awareness into how you are going about having a relationship with someone, how that might be creating tension or conflict for yourself, for the relationship, blah blah blah. So figuring out what type of attachment style you have is like one way to kind of start the process of like, how can you work on this? Again, therapy. I'm always going to recommend therapy for any and all things. Yes. But I think it's, like talking through if someone has an anxious attachment style, like how do you build your own confidence in the relationship, even if you're not physically together? How do you like build a sense of security in that relationship without needing to always be reassured that like that the relationship itself, is solid and strong, and like what are the other things that you can kind of like reflect on that make you feel more comfortable and confident in that relationship. For like an avoidant attachment style, like what is it, what might be preventing you from building a closer bond with somebody? Like what, there might be like an underlying fear of rejection. And so like, because of that, you are then, creating space and distance between yourself and a partner, or like fearful of commitment. Like what's that about? What's like underlying that stuff? So like understanding these things that like, have these connections to our childhood, like where do those things come from? But how does, being aware of them help you address them in the present so that you can still have healthy relationships in the present and future? So that's kind of like the gist of it all. And like some of the things that I would say can be helpful in like identifying your attachment style and then how you're working on it to seek out a more secure relationship.
Yeah, and I loved the fact that you said that you don't want to call other attachment styles unhealthy, because it's just a matter of what is not serving you and distinguishing.
At least that's how that's very much my way of like approaching all of my therapy approach is very much like, I'm not here to like judge you and say that like this is bad or this is wrong, but maybe it's more of like something isn't serving you right now. It doesn't feel helpful. Like, let's figure out what that thing is, because like maybe you think that it's bad, but like it's not on me to like label other people's situations because I'm not them, and like that's your own experience. So like I try to pull back and view it as like, is it helpful or is it hurtful?
Right.
That's my like personal philosophy in all of the work that I do.
And this is why, if you need a therapist, everyone contact Jamie. Do it. No, this is all great. And things that, I mean, like, have you been listening to my therapy sessions? Because, my God, avoidant attachment behavior is the name of the game for Nikisha. Fantastical. That was great, Jamie. Thank you. So the next question that I do have is just more kind of a technical question. Is this a real thing or not? And it's a matter of the custody being given to the sister. And we have the court order therapist that is coming in and assessing the situation. And is it true that if the therapist recommends that the child be placed somewhere else, that the child can be placed somewhere else, even though there is assigned custody by the dead parents, that the sister gets the child?
So here's what I'm like imagining could have happened. Like, let's say that the parents created some kind of like will document saying that if they were unexpectedly, killed by something, that her sister, the aunt, would become the legal guardian. But also, I think there's still like, I imagine a temporary guardianship that's happening, like an emergency situation, because like the actual court processes, I think, take some time. That's my understanding, and I could be wrong. And I'm trying to remember a lot of this that's related to like child welfare, with like temporary guardianship, versus becoming like a full-time custodian for someone. So like there might have been, this is an emergency situation, so we're doing this in an emergency way. But I do think that in a situation where like there are court-ordered services, part of that includes the fact that like they're going to give a recommendation back to the court at the end. And that recommendation could be, I don't think that this situation is the best fit for this child. Maybe we need to explore other options. And like, I would say that for the most part with child welfare, that they will always prioritize or try to prioritize families over just like, releasing a child to foster care or something like that. If there was a plan in place where like the aunt has like becomes the guardian, like that might be step one. And then if she decides ultimately, like, you know what, I don't think that this is the right fit or whatever, that and the grandparents of the father who died are willing to take her on, that like they could probably petition to become the legal guardian. And then, that they might then be the next course. But like, let's say there was nobody else, then, then the state would become the guardian. And like, that's then she would be like released to foster care.
Right. Right.
So if there were no other option, then that's what ends up happening. So it could, be a thing, but there's also, in some states, I think this is like a random aside, but I think that I want to say that most states don't have like built-in, grandparent rights to children, but I think there might be some states where like there is some like priority that grandparents could have in terms of like the line of custody. Yeah. I don't know where that comes in terms of like grandparents versus niece or aunt, rather, especially if it's specifically in their will. So I just think that that's like an interesting piece of information.
That's fascinating.
That is.
Yeah, because I've read. I've dug deep in the relationship subreddit on Reddit often, and sometimes there are people, or like the legal advice subreddit, where people are like, my grandparents are like demanding to have like more access, and they want to like file for some kind of like visitation. And for a lot of places, they're like, no, that's not a thing. But I think it does depend on like where that actually is happening.
Huh.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The more you know.
So
Brian, were you going to say something? Did you have something?
Yeah, I have a question, Jamie. In an ideal world, and I recognize that no situation really is going to be ideal or right down the middle, but in an ideal scenario where M3GAN is obviously not involved, you have this girl who lost her parents, was in the traumatic accident in which they passed, and you have this aunt who's taking on not only the responsibilities of this grieving child, but you're grieving yourself. In an ideal world, like, what would the process be for the two of them without this AI doll to start the process of healing together? Because now the aunt has this responsibility on top of the grief, and this kid is just in a new environment. And it seems like she doesn't have that great of a relationship with her aunt in general. So I guess, what's your thought there?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my answer is going to be therapy.
Sure.
Therapy for the aunt, therapy for the niece, family therapy for the both of them, because it is like a new family unit that they have to adjust to experiencing this like new relationship that they now have.
A question on that alone. You mentioned 3 different therapy sessions. Is this the same therapist, or do you need to ethically have 3 different therapists?
Great question. I mean, yes, and the therapist for the child should have training in working with children. The therapist for the adult, hopefully has training in working with like trauma and grief and things like that. So it's like, hopefully they're also like more attuned to those particular needs of the people that they're working with, but it should be different people. The child therapist can also meet with Allison Williams' character, but not for therapy, more to like just kind of
debrief.
Check in and like, let her know like how it's all going. And then like ideally also the family therapist should be somebody else.
Yeah.
That's a good question that I think a lot of people, it really depends on the situation. Yeah, you're welcome. I think it depends on the situation, and like in some, like more extreme situations, maybe one therapist is taking on the role in multiple spaces, maybe because of like, resources. Maybe they really can't afford a different therapist, and like they're relying on this one therapist. But in an ideal world, as you said, that they would all have their own respective people. But I think, I also really like the idea of this like school thing that she sought out. I feel like she was, I didn't know what she was implying about the type of school that it was. And I was like, how are you going to describe this place? But I could see her trying to say that it's like an alternative school, like for kids who might be dealing with other like behavioral issues like she is. So I think that finding resources that can help provide additional support. Like, there are alternative schools for children with behavioral issues, and like they have they have all these other resources that might come from an IEP, an individualized education plan, where they could provide like school counseling, but like any other, you know, supportive thing that she might need as a result of experiencing this trauma or grief. But like, maybe she can't learn in a traditional environment because like everything is transitioning and like she's reeling from the trauma.
Yeah.
So maybe a situation like this makes the most sense,
Also,
where she can still learn and go to school.
Yeah, they also said she was
Also, she never been to
homeschooled.
school.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, right.
So like, how do you transition someone who's been homeschooled and now like the person who's homeschooling them is dead, and like, you know, Allison Williams isn't a trained homeschool, like she doesn't know. So like,
right,
how do you like help somebody transition back to a potential school environment if they're unable to like take that on themselves? Sure. Which is like a huge load. I can't even conceptualize what homeschool looks like, as like, how do you actually know? I know that there are ways to figure out like what the curriculum is, but like, I'm not a teacher. I can't imagine like figuring out how to take that on in addition to all of my other responsibilities. So it's like, I don't blame her for wanting to seek out, again, all of these additional resources.
That's interesting, because a different movie. So one thing that I did like about this movie is that Katie from the beginning is never presented as this perfect child. She's complaining in the car. She obviously feels guilt for what happened to her parents because she was like a distraction in some ways. Like, but a different type of movie would maybe investigate the fact that like she was homeschooled. She's not socialized that well. That's why she takes to M3GAN, because she like, this is a friend and she's never really had a friend before. And she's a little spoiled because like she's an only child and is homeschooled, and like this movie does not get into that outside of like saying lines that indicate these things. But that's fascinating, like that transition that you bring up, Jamie. Because like, I feel like we get clues of that in this movie, but like, listen, this is a campy horror comedy. Like, we're not getting into the deep and nitty gritty of like all that stuff. So that's fascinating to me for sure.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah.
Any other thoughts on that?
I have two things that I missed from my likes. One, I loved that when we saw through M3GAN's perspective, it like calculated the percent of how the person was feeling based on like body language and look. Like, but I also thought it was interesting because I was watching that, and that relates back to my most recent comment about like guilt, malice, like all those things going up and down. I thought was fascinating as an insight into like what's happening into these children and the people, like confused, like especially when M3GAN is assessing Katie when she comes in and she's trying to convince her at the end to like be with M3GAN or whatnot. I thought that was fascinating. And then something else, when that assistant is stealing the files for M3GAN, I thought that was going to be the setup of the sequel, that like the files survived. You know what I mean? And then when M3GAN frames him and kills like everyone in that elevator sequence, and that's when it came up, like it felt a little bit like, oh, that was it, oh, like that's how you're gonna frame him, oh, okay, that's fine. So that was something there. Also, I forgot to mention this big conversation that Jamie and I had in the car the other day, and she brought it up, and I thought it was absolutely fascinating, so I want to give her props.
It's like, what did I say?
James Wan produced this, and part of the story is credited to him. I think that Malignant freed James Wan. I think that James Wan created these incredible horror movies like Saw, like Insidious, like the two first Conjuring movies, and then he goes on to do like some pretty good movies like people really like the Aquaman movie, but Dead Silence gets absolutely panned, and people don't really understand what he's doing there, because like this is this weird campy giallo jaunt where these other movies are kind of serious, more grounded, if you will, horror movies with like deep relationships and really spooky sequences. And then all of a sudden we have these expectations for Malignant, and Malignant comes out and is a total divisive, wild, campy movie But the trailer presented as like the next scary James Wan movie. And the reaction from that was like, wait, what the hell did I just watch? And you either really enjoyed it or couldn't get into the tone of it. And we all had very interesting reaction to it because our expectations were very, very different what the movie presented. And I enjoy the movie now after the fact and having watched it a second time, like casually, than the first time we all watched it, because like, you know what you're getting. And I feel like that freed him from that expectation that every time he's going to deliver a Conjuring or an Insidious. And he didn't direct this one, but like, I feel like we understood more knowing that Malignant just came out and we saw that wild trailer for this. And like, now James Wan's kind of like a Willy Wonka character where like, you don't know if he's lying or not. You don't know if his next movie is going to be like Conjuring, like all-time great horror movie with like deep emotional connections and great characters and like thematic elements that really pop off the screen, or like Malignant, like let's just like dive the fuck into this thing. And I think that is a wonderful thing for the horror world.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. And even with us talking about this, I was thinking about Malignant, but that's a great comparison with the trailers and like what the expectation was as to what you were going to get. And this one is like, we know we're going to get camp, so it's all camp. So it's really great. That's a great point. Yeah, Jamie, all the good things. Fantastic. So should we get into Rotten Tomatoes?
Let's rotten those tomatoes. No, that's not what you do. But let's do Rotten Tomatoes, yes.
It's the Rotten Tomatoes game.
Okay, we have M3GAN on Rotten Tomatoes. What do you think it has? What do you think our girl M3GAN has on Rotten Tomatoes? Nikisha, let's start with you.
I want to say, I want to put this higher, but I want to give it like an 86.
All right. Jamie, what does M3GAN have?
I'm going to go like a tiny bit lower and say an 81.
Well, you are both very, very wrong. This has a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yay!
Damn!
You're the audience score is a 79%. So you're closer-ish to that for sure. But yeah, it's a 94%, and it basically says, unapologetically silly and all the more entertaining for it, M3GAN is the rare horror comedy that delivers chuckles as effortlessly as chills. I think this movie gets your grade if the trailer isn't what it is. The expectations set for this movie are everything were the most important thing about this.
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
Let's look at, I forget what Malignant has, but let's see here. Malignant has a 76% for the critic consensus, and it says, although Malignant isn't particularly scary, director James Wan's return to horror contains plenty of gory thrills and a memorably bonkers twist. So that's the difference, though, I guess. The real difference is that, like, Malignant has the twist that they didn't want to spoil, because that's a part of the fun of it, the wild twist.
Right.
No spoilers here for Malignant. But M3GAN, like, we know what we're getting. Like, we know it's not a twist that the doll is doing it the whole time. So, like, you're allowed to be more open about what the tone of your movie is versus the Malignant. You think it's a serious one, and it is, but, you know, it's... Anyway, that's my rant about Malignant versus that. Anyway, let's get into the 4 S's.
Yes.
Skull, scare, shakes, and suggestions. The Talking Horrors 4 S's.
Okay, we have skulls, scares, shakes, and suggestions. And then we're going to do skulls, scares, and shakes 1 through 10. Skulls, how do you think this handled mental health and human behavior? Scares, how scary was it? And then you have shakes. How much are you going to, or dances? How much are you going to be able to, dance this, M3GAN dance this off? Is this a one and done? We'll see there. So, Jamie, let's start with you. Let's start with you with your skulls.
Sure. So for skulls, I gave this a 6. I think that there are a lot of people who are peopling. I think that there's a lot of exaggerated responses in people, but like it's still coming from things that I think are more or less based in reality. And then once it like actually kind of goes more into like the trauma and grief and like talking about codependence and attachment, it actually becomes more realistic. But the therapist being very confused about what her job is in the beginning definitely loses some points for me.
Yes.
For scares, I gave this a 1. I didn't think that this movie was scary at all. Again, it's PG-13, so I imagine that they probably edited out a lot of the spookier things. Can't wait for an unedited director's cut.
Yes.
All in on that.
All in.
I just want to see Megan murder more people.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, this wasn't scary. And then for shakes, I'm giving this a 5. I think that this was a really great start to, as I said to Brian in the theater after we watched it, that this is the best horror of 2023. But I can say that because it was only like the 5th day of the year. So I'm sure there will be more, but I was really excited for this. It delivered on exactly what I wanted, and it was an overall great time. And I'm going to tell everybody that they all need to go see this movie because it's just really fun.
Yeah.
Nikisha, what about you?
Yeah, I'm close to Jamie on the skulls. I'm going to give it a 7, especially with the conversations that we had about the attachment styles and how that is portrayed in this movie. So even though some of the people things were a little questionable, like Jamie said, it was still really good. And for scares, I'm going to give it a 3 because, you know, that dog in the car got me.
Me too, Nikisha.
It got me.
I was so upset with myself.
Same.
I saw you jump in the theater and then be like, ugh.
Yeah, like, damn it.
Truly.
Yeah.
Truly. So this is a 3 for me. And Shakes, I'm going to give this a 10. I will watch this a million times over. This is a great movie. I have been telling everybody to watch this movie, and I loved everything about it. So 10 for me.
Great. Yeah, Skulls, I'm going to give this a 6 for me. I think that for all the reasons that you all had mentioned, this stays at a 6 for me. This is also a little bit more thoughtful than I thought it would be. Listen, like I said before, this is not like an over analytical, movie about like, attachment theory and like grief, but like it's trying, especially during the sad scene with Megan in the testing. That I love that something like that wasn't included in the trailer, because that was a nice layering and dynamic aspect of this movie that I did not expect. Scares, I'm giving it a 2 for the dog and her opening the toy. Those are the 2 scariest parts of the movie. And then I'm giving this a 7. Like, I will absolutely remember this and suggest this to people. But to me, this is not something I can suggest to everybody no matter what. This, like, it has to be a specific type of person looking for a specific type of thing. Whereas, like, there are other 10s that we have on here, or 8s or 9s for me, where I would suggest it, like based on like a Rosemary's Baby or something like that. Or I'm looking at other 10s on here, like Get Out. You know what I mean? Like, those are like, it doesn't matter what kind of horror fan you are, you need to watch this, versus this, where it's like, this is for certain types of people. But yeah, that's for me. All right, let's go into suggestions. Nikisha, let's start with you.
Yeah, I was thinking about TV shows.
Interesting.
TV shows of technology going awry and AI things, especially since we have our TikTok of movie suggestions. So I am going to suggest, if you like the whole technology gone wrong thing, Westworld.
Good one.
Time. Lots of good AI moments. Black Mirror, of course. Lots of good moments there. There's also an anthology series on Amazon Prime called Solos, and some of the technology AI things in there are really cool as well, even though it's pretty low on Rotten Tomatoes. But I was like, this is entertaining to me, and I love an anthology series.
Cool.
So Solos on Amazon Prime. And then the last one, it's technology gone wrong, but it's a comedy, and it's also Amazon Prime, and it's called Upload, and it's really great and cute, and I love it. But all the technology is really terrible.
Jamie.
Yeah, I went pretty basic. I would suggest Child's Play if you want the story of a child's doll companion who is not as it seems. It's a great time.
Cool. Great time.
I've got two. One, if you want more Allison Williams, but you've already seen like the Get Outs and the Perfections of the world. Try Horizon Line. It's more of a like, oh no, I need to fly the plane. How do we survive type of movie, as opposed to like a horror movie, like that type. But just in terms of like, if you want more to add to your why should Allison Williams be in the horror movie conversation, and when Jamie and I talked about this, not the Scream Queens, but the horror movie actress. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That one. And then my second one is, if you want the best AI robot movie, horror movie, sci-fi movie, whatever you want to define it, you need to watch Ex Machina.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. I love that movie. So yeah, that's my other one. Cool.
Great. Fantastical. Well, that wraps up our episode of M3GAN. Brian, you want to give me that government name again?
Yeah, absolutely. It is the Model 3 generative android. Model 3 generative android.
Mrs. Android, if you're nasty. That's what we're going to say. All right, guys. So go ahead, Brian.
Oh, one thing I want to say before we end, and I know we're running long here, but this was our first horror movie of the year, and I'm super pumped about it. I saw 35 new horror movies last year. Like, I saw 35 horror movies that came out in 2022 last year. I'm saying it on the podcast. I would like to break that record this year. I'm keeping my list. So M3GAN is the first one of this year. I would love to get my number over that. So that we can just be a little bit more contextual on this podcast. And that's all I'm going to say. Absolutely. Thank you. Have a great day.
Well, also, we need to shout out Shudder so that we can make that happen. Yeah. We can cover all of the new Shudder movies that come out on this podcast. So Shudder, help us out. # help us out. Because we're doing our best. And great. So just doing our best. This wraps up our episode. You can follow us on all of the social medias at Talk Horror Pod. And we have some really cool things happening on the TikTok, so please go check that out as well. And we're trying to get to 10K followers. So help us out, guys. Give us a little follow. And Brian, where can they listen to us?
Yeah, you can listen to us wherever you get podcasts. So that is things like Spotify, the Google Podcast, Stitcher, and of course, Apple Podcasts. Rate and review us there. 5 stars, please.
And thank you. So I think we already said it, but we're going to end it with Titanium.
Yeah, absolutely. Fire away, fire away.
Fire away.
Oh my God. My whole body leapt into the screen during that scene. Like, I just felt like my soul leave my body and was like, this is what I needed from this movie. This is what I want. This is what I needed. Everything.
Absolutely. So good.
She did. She sent an email.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Right.
Bye.
Oh yeah, remember when she intercepted that phone call? Wild. Anyway, all right.
Oh, that was great.
Yeah.